Frederick C. Painton. He was an American military reporter, a writer, contributor for the Reader's Digest magazine. And let's see if I have a picture from right there. That's a picture from 1943, September, in New York City, actually. American reporter over in wartime era in distant lands, right? So I'm making this video right now about Frederick C. Painton because I was going through thrift stores and came across the Reader's Digest. Picked it up because Palestine and Israel are in the news and it had Palestine written in it, July 1944, time capsule. So I picked it up, and it wasn't until just recently where I reread it because of, like I said, in the news, Israel and Palestine. And he has two in this Reader's Digest, one from Italy, reports from Italy, and then one from Palestine. But in this issue, it was the dissenting reports. So it was international, mostly American Zionists who were criticizing his report. So I reread it, and it wasn't any of his words. It was people criticizing him. So, of course, I have to get the issue, his issue that had his report on it, Reports of Palestine. So I got May 1944. So this is, I'm going to imagine I'm an American in 1944 reading the Reader's Digest on the reports from Palestine. There is no state called Israel. There is just a large diaspora of Jews all around. So I'm just going to go right into it and read it. Educational purposes only. Page 21. I'm going to read the whole thing. It's only 3 pages, but what is the truth behind the passion and politics and the controversy over the extending immigration to the Jewish homeland? Report on Palestine by Frederick C. Painton. The bitter, long-standing, and complicated cord between the Jews and the Arabs in Palestine is flaring up again and on the front pages of the world's newspapers. Again, this is May 1944. The Reader's Digest assigned Frederick C. Painton, the American, its correspondent in the Near Eastern theater to try to get the facts about the situation, which is so thoroughly obscured by passion and by politics. He revisited Palestine, interviewed leaders of both factions, sought out impartial observers, inspected the cities, the factories, the groves, and the farms. This is his report. It is as honest and objective as it is in my power to write, he said. It was intended solely as a memorandum to the editors that they intelligently appraise current articles on the subject. It seems to us, however, so informative and so important as to warrant publication. So he's in Israel, 1944, writing on the reports. Seems kind of scientific. The nub of the Jewish-Arab problem in Palestine is, of course, immigration. The Jews want unrestricted Jewish immigration up to a total of 4 million. The Arabs say they will not tolerate any more Jewish immigration, but agree not to oppose or hinder the 550,000 Jews now in Palestine. So there's currently 500,000 Jews in Palestine, 1944. The British White Paper, which is now in force, provides for 1, the stabilization of Palestine's population in the proportion of 1/3 Jews to 2/3 Arabs. 2, the sale of land to Jews to be restricted to certain specified areas. 3, no Jewish immigration after March 1944. But the restriction does not include some 33,000 still arrive. 4, within the 10 years that British government will re-examine the Palestinian question with a view to granting local autonomy. The Arabs, for the moment at least, are content to stand on the white paper. The Jews are vigorously and even violently opposing the white papers. But because of the war, a sort of armistice has been set up which, except for the extremists, have been reasonably well observed. The Arabs look around them and see autonomy in Lebanon, Iraq, Transjordan, Saudi Arabia. The Palestinian Arab would like the autonomy too, but does not see how it can get it. For the moment, the Arabs are afraid of the Jews. This is for 2 reasons. First, the Jews are more articulate and have a word press and vast wealth. I could say that again. Second, the Jews have been smuggling in arms on a rather astonishing scales. Not only rifles, but also machine guns and mortars, and are getting good, I'm told, at making grenades. The Arab is unorganized. He has no spokesman, and he has few arms. That ain't true. Maybe in 1944 is true. I was told that if it came to a showdown, the Jews, despite their inferior numbers, could shoot it out with the Arabs and probably win. Hence, the Arab is leaning upon the British to protect him. This is 1944. The Jews have begun a campaign in the United States to persuade our government to use influence or pressure to get Britain to rescind the immigration clause. The British believe that they have lived up to the letter of the Balfour Declaration, which said only that His Majesty's government's views which favor the establishment of the home for Jews in Palestine. There is a home, they say, and Britain is absolved. The Arab looks at the past decade and his own strides forward in civilization and wants the present white papers, in parentheses, situation continued, unless it is to be changed to admit Palestine to a pan-Arab state, including Iraq, Syria, Transjordan, and so on. You can include Yemen in that now, I guess. The Jews say that they will never... Wait, they didn't even mention Iran. I guess maybe that's still like Persia. I don't know. 1944, Iran. All right, continuing. The Jews say they will never consent to autonomy for Palestine. With 1,200,000 Arabs against 550,000 Jews, declares Harry Bailin of the Jewish Agency, we become again, as elsewhere, a minority race, and the very ends for which a Palestine homeland was asked for and destroyed. They've been the Zionist movement from probably late 19th century, but of course the beginning of the 20th century, the 1920s. Where was I? The Jews would accept, Bailin says, a Jewish crown colony of Palestine, with the Jews in the majority, of course. What are the facts in the Jewish case? The Jews have poured millions of dollars into Palestine. New Jerusalem is a modern city. Tel Aviv, which is no longer the capital because Trump made Jerusalem the capital, Tel Aviv, swamped by the influx of refugees, is a city of 200,000. Refugees have bought in several industries, such as diamond cutting by Dutch Jews from Amsterdam and the manufacture of important pharmaceutical products. The health conditions of Palestine have improved vastly. Trachoma, for instance, is no longer a scourge. Hadash Hospital, with 250 beds, is a $1 million institution staffed by the world-renowned surgeons, refugees. So refugees are surgeons there. I guess he's trying to make it sound good. Many thousands of acres of Palestine have been reclaimed by the Jews and put to fertile production. The Kvatsot, that's probably a Hebrew word or Arabic, Kvatsot, or collective of settlements, have terraced rocky soil, planted trees, found water, and have made the soil produce. In the swamps of the north, where malaria was a scourge, for centuries, they are draining the land, destroying the mosquito, and bringing the land into production. Down in the Jordan River Valley, I visited a settlement. Again, this is Frederick C. Painton. Down in the Jordan River Valley, I visited a settlement that was doing an amazing thing. The land there is 17% salt and is hideously barren. Some young Jews of high caliber parentage went to work in the potash workers there and established a settlement not far away. From the Jordan, they piped sweet water onto the land and let it soak down through so that it carried off the salt. They did this 80 times in 8 months, washed the salt off the topsoil, and got a yield of tomatoes, which was a great per acre as elsewhere. Farmers reporting on Palestine, reports from Palestine, 1944. And he mentioned that those were Jewish people making the land fertile, The settlement is completely communal. Men taking turnabout at the washing and tilling the soil and laboring in the potash works. I got to look up what potash is. It is incredible drudgery in summer. I can imagine. It's the Middle East. It's the desert. The temperature reaches 160. And our American military are over there carrying how much weight on their back, right? But they carry on. I had only administration for such dogged endurance and courage, but common sense told me that if it was a normal charge for labor were made, the tomatoes produced would cost perhaps 60 cents each. It showed that the desire for their own farmland and their own homeland is driving obsession with many Jews. Well, yeah, for anybody, you would want that. So a driving obsession for many Jews. Yeah, anybody wants to take care of their own homeland. But I guess he's talking about the reclaiming of the land. It was salt on there, and they were able to get rid of the salt and now make the land fertile and now grow. I visited a collective farm not far from Jerusalem, which I had at first seen in 1932. So he was there for a while. Okay, 1932. He's writing now in 1944. Then it was nothing. A few poor little farmsteads, which provided a bare existence. Well, okay. Now there are new buildings, a pine forest planted on the hills and tall and green and holding some water. The collective is at last self-supporting and has grown from 40 persons to more than 300. The psychological aspects are important. Harry Bailin summed it up here, saying, "Here I have no inferiority complex. I haze something that belongs to me and my people, and I walk with my head high. Here I never see a sign restricted clientele or Jews not allowed." This was the settlement outside of Jerusalem, I believe. Here we have our national songs and our national dance, and Hebrew is a living tongue. They resurrected Hebrew. What, they spoke Yiddish before? They resurrected a dead language, just like if you did it to Latin or Gaelic, which they tried, but kudos to them, right? 1944. The Jews have raised the standard of living in Palestine. An unskilled laborer now gets 40 piastres, which is equal to $1.60 a day. Skilled laborers, as plasterers and stonemasons, get as high as $4. This is 1944. Attracted by such wages, about 500,000 Arabs have come to Palestine in 12 years. In Egypt, the payment for unskilled labor is 10 piastres a day. Piastres. I'm probably butchering that. What is an Arab's case? One of the Jews' original arguments for the establishment of the Jewish homeland was that the Jews should go back to the soil, seize to the urban and go rural. Seize to the urban and go rural. The diaspora of Jews, they were always restricted to those ghettos, right? The urban. They wanted to go back and go rural, right? Makes sense to me. By the Jews' own figures today, however, only 113,000, 23% of Palestine's 550,000 Jews, are on the land. The other 77% are in cities. Damn. The Jews declared in 1923, this is the Zionist movement, that the Palestine homeland would eventually be self-supporting. 2 decades later, it is still an enormous philanthropical venture. The British say it is 40% self-supporting. The Jews say 60%. The United States alone, according to official documents, sends $5.5 million into Palestine each year, of which $500,000 is donated by Christians. This is 1944. How many years and how long have we been sending millions of dollars over there? Oh my goodness, I continue. To the cry that more Jews should be admitted, the Arabs reply that the country cannot support the 4 million immigrants the Jews ask for. According to authoritative figures, Palestine has only 2.2 million acres of productive and potentially productive farmland. You cannot get enough to eat in Palestine today. This is very Marxian thought. I was hungry all the time. I was there, although I had money to buy whatever I needed. So socialism, Venezuela, China, think any of those places. The population is now 144.5 persons per square mile, as against 11.2 in Oregon. Okay, for example, and if you were to increase it to 5.5 million by adding 4 million more Jews, you would have a population density greater than that of Belgium, one of the most industrialized nations of the world. These I recognize that I'm reading right now as I turn the page in the dissent that I'll read right after, which is just like 1 page long. This is the last page right here. Is it? Or did I miss it? No, sorry. When this fact is pointed out to the Jews, as well as the homeland's failure to be self-supporting, they admit the facts and say that the way out is now to go on the land, but to industrialize. Which means they were talking about rural society before. Now they have to industrialize, which they don't go hand in hand. We all know that. They point to the growth of such exports as diamonds and pharmaceutical products to the Shemen oil concern of Haifa. I believe that's a city, and to the big potash works. I want to look up potash. However, Palestine would then be a small, highly industrialized Jewish state situated in the center of a hostile Arab world boycotting Jewish goods. Whoa, talk about like the BDS situation, and they're calling Palestine a Jewish state rather than it being Israel. Something like that. All right. Where was I? However, Palestine would Arab would be boycotting Jewish goods. Henrietta Sold, founder of Hadassah, and Grand Old Lady of Palestine, had said many times that the fatal mistake of the Jews were from the very beginning of the Zionist movement was their failure to understand, to make friends with Arabs. You know, I'm going to just real quick say that I hear that on the internet so much. They do understand that now, that you're living with these people. You have to be friends with them. It's both your homelands. I've heard that a lot of times. So good to say that. I think we've come far, maybe. Recently, I went to the Palestine Industrial Products exhibit in Tel Aviv. It was very impressive in the number of its products, but many steel, iron, and other manufacturers enjoy a sale only because of war-restricted commerce. That's just like in America during this exact time, actually. I'm doing another project with my ancestors' documents, and we have to do rationing for the war during this time in America. Furthermore, and in peacetime, they could not compete. Okay. It was very impressive. In peacetime, they could not compete against American or English products. Furthermore, and this is more important, the Jewish agency people fear that the skilled refugees who make many of these products will return to their native lands when the war is over. The Czech Jews, Czechia today, Czech Republic, were being absorbed in their nation until the war. Again, what's very confusing is no mention of the Holocaust or Shoah this whole time. This is 1944. I believe we already entered the war knowing about the Holocaust and Shoah. This is grim. They knew no persecutions, no bars. They look upon themselves. They told me this. This is what he said. They told me this as Czechs, not as Jews. So interesting. And are anxious to go home. The Dutch diamond cutter intends to go home to Holland. Strangely enough, scores of German Jews want to go back to Germany. This failure to sink roots deeply applies equally to Americans. Of the 5,500 American Jews in Palestine, fewer than 100 have given up their American passports. I'm going to read that one more time. So 5,500 American Jews in Palestine, fewer than 100 have given up their American passports. He's just trying to say that they don't want to rescind that nationality yet. They don't want to be expats yet. And I mean, really, it's the times, 1944. The Jews in Palestine know this and fear it. It is one reason why the extremists are making their gesture now. Many leading Jews told me they feared they would lose their main argument at war's ends by having no immigrants. The recent acts of violence in Palestine committed by Jewish extremists are deplored by the Jewish leaders. While I was in Jerusalem, I heard 9 bomb explosions not far from my hotel. The immigration offices of the Palestine Mandate at Haifa and Tel Aviv were blown up, and 2 Palestine policemen were murdered. There are 3 extremist groups, all illegal military organizations. They have fascist manners and fascist uniforms and are stormtroopers. There are also gangs of real outlaws. The contention is that the Arabs, by raising hell in 1936, cowed the British government into producing the white paper. So these Jews now hope the same tactic will cow the British into reinstating immigration, Jewish immigration to Palestine, or whatever land they're calling that at the time. The Arabs cite the following facts. They own most of the land, including 95% of the olive groves. They own 215,000 cattle against the Jews, who only have 28,000. The Arabs have 225,000 sheep against the Jews, 20,000. They're comparing livestock. Sorry, that's a little funny. And all the pigs and camels, the figures have shown the Arabs stake in the land and disprove the charge that an Arab is a nomad to the land. They have the most livestock. Hey, they're using law and legality and science. Very interesting. Or trying, as opposed to the other people who are using other means. As the Transjordan people said bitterly, moving the Arabs out of Palestine to let in the Jews is comparable to asking the people in Kansas to pick up and get out so that newcomers could settle on the land. Going right to the point. Wow. The Arab has been on the land here for hundreds of years, and he will fight to the death to stay on it. And it now looks as if he will have support from the surrounding Arab states within the hot protests that our State Department by Egypt, Iran, and the rest. It says witnessed by the hot protests of our State Department in Egypt, Iran, and the rest when somebody introduced a resolution in the Congress to back up the Zionist demand for repeal of the white paper immigration clause. He had this in parentheses. So someone in the U.S. Congress proposed the United States government Congress to support the Zionist movement in backing up the white papers and immigration clause of the British. I guess that's the British white papers that's calling for the immigration clause to go to modern day 1944 Palestine. My information, a government Arab official, one I cannot name, said, "We have no outside funds. We must do things by ourselves. Out of ourselves, therefore, we need time. People who say we have remained static for hundreds of years forget that when we were under a Turkish rule, we had no sympathetic support, but were held down. To show that the Arab is trying to progress and has advanced in the past 25 years of mandate, he gave me some figures. The Arab town of Nablus, for instance, has grown to 40,000 people between 1919 and 1942, more than 1,000 new houses, 427 shops, a hotel, a paper factory, 2 new modern mills, and a match factory were built. Some 65,000 Arab children are in Palestine's public schools, 35,000 others in private or Christian schools. He pointed out that each year, as more Arab children were educated, teachers would be available to educate the others. He declared that the Arab is becoming socially conscious and giving money for orphans, schools, hospitals, and trade schools. The Jews claims that the improvements made by the Arabs derive from the British Mandate Law. They're not giving them any credit to them. They're saying it's from the British. The influx of Jewish money and the stirrings of Arab nationalism that sprang from the jealousy of the Jews. The Arab is enjoying a great prosperity in Palestine, but if you should withdraw the millions of dollars of a year invisible import of Jewish philanthropy, and the standard of living in Palestine had to be what the country itself could support, the level would fall back precisely where it had been, no different from the rest of the Arab world. If you stop funneling it, I guess. And this guy's saying, don't get the vaccine, it'll magnetize you on my Twitch channel. He's funny. You made me lose my spot. All right. But if you should withdraw, yeah, I read that. If this should happen, the question would arise, would the Arab improvements go on? Would the gradual rise in culture continue if they stopped all the money? Okay, so here is the conclusion, and then I will read the, hello, Big Papa. Here's the conclusion, and then I'm going to read the dissents from the Zionists, I guess. It's really short, too. So if you're just joining, this is 1944 Reports on Palestine from Reader's Digest. And I'm going to read after the dissenting criticisms from Zionists of this American military war reporter. There are many statistics to buttress the above outline, but I see no reason to adduce them here because they would only increase but not improve the outline given. That's a word salad. I'm shipping them to you. No matter how honestly and factually the various arguments are advanced, the protest will be aroused. The Zionist has a fanatic spiritual belief in a greater Palestine for Jews. Damn, dude, that's not like how America or the West portrays the issue over there. I'm going to read that one more time. The Zionist has a fanatic spiritual belief in a greater Palestine for Jews. But the Arab picks up the soil in his hands and says it is his, and no third party, no third power in the world can take it away from him without a fight. Over here, reporters and observers have distinct sympathy for both factions, and reading through this whole thing, yeah, he had for both factions. He did have concerns and discrepancies, Over here, the reporters have observers have distinct sympathy for both factions and complete bewilderment as to how the solution can be obtained. The immediate problem is the insoluble. The Arab world will rise if the white paper clause on immigration is rescinded. If the clause is not rescinded, the extremist groups will try violence so long as it seems to help the case. The Zionist will never consent to autonomy for Palestine, while he is a minority. If the status quo be continued under the white paper, the Arab will remain quiet, but the Zionist will say to the world that the original ideal of the Balfour Declaration of Zionism, I gotta look that one up, Balfour Declaration of Zionism, has been thwarted, and the Jewish problem remains just what it always has been. Again, no mention of Shoah or Holocaust in this whole 1944 Reader's Digest. The idea of partitioning, or like any persecution, I don't know. I guess it's off topic. It's talking about the Palestine, Middle East, not Europe. I don't know. The idea of partitioning will not work, and here's why. Originally, Palestine was part of a big Turkish domain that was Syria. After 1919, it was cut up into Transjordan, Syria, Palestine, etc., etc. But the whole was an economic unit, just as Austria-Hungary was an economic unit. Okay, I understand that. Pan-Arabism, think of it that way. And when you separate Austria from Hungary, the breadbasket, Austria, died. So too, for the outside money would Palestine wither, because Syria and Transjordan raised the food to make the whole self-supporting. So what he's saying is the Arab nations would take care of themselves and not everyone as a whole. A tiny Jewish state surrounded by hatred and tariff walls would perish. The decision of the United States to get into the Middle East oil business by building a pipeline from Saudi Arabia, also figures importantly in the affair. The pipeline will run for hundreds of miles through Arab territory and will depend upon friendly Arabs who won't put a few bombs in a pumping station. Consequently, as Jews sadly told me, the United States in its foreign policy will unquestionably do nothing to offend Arab leaders like Ibn Saud, which means that the Arab Jew problem will remain precisely as it is now until after the peace, which is 2021, and the problem continues. Then if my observations are correct, the Palestine problem will die out by sheer lack of Jews who would give up their own homeland to plant themselves anew in the sterile hills of Judea. All right, so that was the entire passage from Frederick C. Painton, which was an American war reporter, went all the way to Italy and Europe, Africa, and in Middle East, Palestine. He wrote that in the May 1944 Reader's Digest titled Reports on Palestine. And right here, quick, so I can finish up this video, these are the dissenting reports on Palestine. That is page 113. It's on a little war bond logo. And this is criticism against what you just heard. Dissenting Reports on Palestine, a digest of opposing opinions by readers who disagreed with Frederick C. Painton on the Zionist problem. Since publication in the May Reader's Digest, the one we just did, Frederick C. Painton's report on Palestine, numerous letters have been received from Zionist. After the writing of the reports on Palestine, letters were sent to Reader's Digest from Zionist leaders and others objecting to some statements and conclusions to the article. The major criticisms may be summarized as follows. Mr. Painton quoted the Arabs as maintaining that Palestine could not support the 4 million immigrants the Jews asked for because the population density would be greater than that of highly industrialized Belgium. Critics point out that Belgium is over 70 per square mile, and Palestine would be only 527 per square mile. Objection is made to Mr. Painton's comparison of Palestine with underdeveloped Oregon. Holding that fairer comparison would be Massachusetts, which has 522 people per square mile. So they're saying, it has the potential of what Massachusetts could be. Commenting on the statement that the Jews have not gone rural as they planned, and that only 23% of those in Palestine are on soil. Critics point out that in the U.S., only 19.3% of total population is on farms. Others argue that the Jews are not allowed to buy more land for development anyhow. Well, I live out on rural land. It's not necessarily on a farm. It's next to a farm. You cannot get enough to eat in Palestine today. I was hungry all the time I was there, wrote Mr. Painton. This statement is criticized because the dislocation of wars has caused food shortages everywhere. Mr. Painton estimated the cost of growing tomatoes in Jordan Valley as about 60 cents a tomato. In rebuttal, it is contended that the cost is a great deal to grow the first crop because it was necessary to reclaim the salt lands and that the succeeding crops will cost much less. Okay. Mr. Painton remarked that whereas the Jews declared in 1923, I think maybe the Balfour Declaration, that the Palestine homeland would eventually be self-supporting. It remains, after 20 years, an enormous philanthropical venture. Critics answer that it is important of capital from abroad. Critics answer that it is important of capital from abroad and normal and essential in any rapidly developing country, saying that anyone will take money that they need it. They claim that much of this outside capital is used not for maintenance, but for reclamation of the land and for development of new projects. The remainder being devoted to rehabilitation of persecuted European Jews who have found refuge in Palestine. There you go. That's the first time I heard about like Holocaust persecution of Jews or Shoah, 1944 July in dissent. These are critics. These are Jewish critics. That's very ominous. One of the most controversial points is Mr. Payton's reference to the Balfour Declaration as saying only His Majesty's government view with favor the establishment of a home for the Jews in Palestine, saying that Britain was saying that. Correspondents argue that this is an unfair summary of the declaration, which reads as follows: His Majesty's government view with favor the establishment in Palestine of the national homeland for the Jewish people, and will use their best endeavors to facilitate the achievement of this object. It is being clearly understood that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine, or the rights and political status enjoyed by the Jews in any other country. The White Papers of 1939, terminating Jewish immigration by March 1944, and restricting Jews' land purchase in 95% of Palestine, seems these readers to be a negation of the Balfour Declaration, and in line with the appeasement policy of the Chamberlain government. Winston Churchill, many letters remind us, characterized the White Papers as a plain breach of a solemn obligation. It is further argued that the report should have acknowledged the responsibility which the United States shouldered in 1924 when the government signed a treaty with England declaring, among other things, that no changes would be made in the terms of the British mandate in Palestine without our consent. He might be talking about Jews without their consent. I don't know. Many of the letters emphasize the fact that no responsible Jewish leaders have advocated moving the Arabs out of Palestine. They point out that instead, the Arab population in Palestine has increased nearly 100% during the period of Jewish development. Wages, as Mr. Payton reported, would have gone up as much as 400% in the public health, and it would have improved tremendously because of modern hospitals open to Jews and Arabs alike, and sanitary improvements wrought by the Zionist settlers. So he's saying that, this is just critics of what he was saying before. The letters suggest that the question of whether Jewish settlers intend to remain in Palestine was misinterpreted. Now, picture in your head right now that famous picture of Palestine and Israel and the encroachment, I guess, of Israel into the West Bank area, Gaza, whatever. I really don't care. Just reading this for educational purposes. Okay. The letter suggests that the question of whether Jewish settlers intend to remain in Palestine was misinterpreted. Mr. Payton reported that only 100 of the 5,500 American Jews had surrendered their American passports, and that many refugees would return to their native lands when the war was over. But no people, the critics say, who have worked so hard as the Jews in Palestine would be willing to leave the land they have toiled over. And I guess that that's true. It's 2021 and boomed, right? The population and the state, everything, with the help from the United States, British, everyone. But yeah, where am I? To uncertainty about British policy is attributed the retention of American passports. It is argued that Polish, German, and Romanian Jews will not be welcome in their original homelands after the war is over. That's interesting. This is 1944 saying, buddy, if those Jews went back home, they wouldn't be looked at as Germans. They wouldn't be looked at as Czechs. They wouldn't be looked at as Polish. They'd be looked at as Jews, which was so during the World Wars. I don't know. I'm in 2021. And let's see. And President Beneš of Czechoslovakia is quoted as saying that it is impossible for Jews to ever return here. So they even have him quoted saying that. A number of the letters dwelt on the misconception that might arise because of aspects of the problem not covered by the report. Some protested that there was no recognition of the century-old problem of the Jews in Europe, that broad international aspects have been ignored, that, for example, mention should have been made of the Arabs' gains from the last war when they received territory more than 100 times of the area of Palestine. These Arab states have independence. I think he's talking about Iran. While Palestine has not. Their rulers have great wealth that might be applied to the improvement of the land and to industrial development, thus ameliorating the poverty of the average. So right there, again, was a mention of the persecution in Europe, but very light. I guess maybe the news did not reach yet everywhere, even though I thought we entered the war because of the news. It was felt that some tribute should have been paid to the superb restraint exercised by the Jews under the Arab provocation and the fact that they persisted in their settlements in the face of grave danger. I understand. It was pointed out, too, that the Arabs everywhere have refused to help the Allies in the war effort, in sharp contrast to the Jews who have given their wholehearted support to the United Nations. Attention was called to the activities of the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem in the 3 years before the war, when violent attacks were made upon the Jews and a state of civil war existed. The Grand Mufti is now a guest of the Germans in Berlin. Finally, the moral of the case for offering refuge in Palestine to the persecuted Jews of Europe is presented eloquently in many letters. The correspondence, in fact, reflects stirringly the courage, the zeal, and the faith which animate the Zionist movement in attempts to deal constructively with one another, with one of the most tragic examples of injustice in history of mankind. All right, that was Reader's Digest, both of them. That was better than I thought it'd be. Educational and a time capsule. Yeah. Thanks for watching.